In the meantime, if you're logging in and you're reading the screen, you might notice that we have a Pigeonhole app activated, so that if you have any questions along the presentation, you can go ahead and write them in. So we have a minute or two before we start. If you want to get comfortable, grab something to drink. We'll be starting soon.
Damar, is there a way to post the Pigeonhole link in a chat where parents can, if they come in late, they can still access it?
Yes, we can do that.
That'll be great. Thank you so much, Damar.
Yeah.
All righty, so 2 minutes in, we're going to go ahead and start this presentation today. We would like to welcome parents who are on board, interested in our topic. We're going to go in by referring to some specifics of the presentation. We'd like for you to remember to avoid using the chat, because sometimes it gets a little bit distracting. And if you have questions, we will have the Pigeonhole app available. There's the password, it's called child, and you may as well just write those questions in there so that we can review and discuss at the end. Give you a chance to do that. So today, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce our counseling team. We can also just say hello to each other, and so that you know who is here present today. Not all of our counselors are here today, but we are just representing each one of our divisions. So you might already know me. I'm Catherine. I'm the lower elementary counselor. I work from pre-kinder 3 to 1st grade, and I'm here to help facilitate this important presentation today. So I'm going to pass it over to Raul, who can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Raul Alvarado. I'm the upper elementary 2nd and 5th grade counselor. So glad that you're here with us today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Restrepo. I am the middle school counselor, and thank you for being here, spending this time with us on this important theme for everyone.
Hi, parents. Thank you for joining us and tuning in to this very important meeting. My name is Sammy Jamal, and I am the high school counselor representing today.
Thank you, team. So today I'd like just to make a brief announcement. We're going to be talking about child abuse and child protection. So it is a very sensitive topic. If in any moment you feel this is very disturbing or it's something that really triggers you, we encourage you to just keep that in mind, and you might want to just refrain from the presentation and completely understand, but it's just important for you to share this information before we start. Okay. So our presentation will be focusing on how to protect our children, and to making sure that we all understand that it is all of our roles, all of our responsibilities. When we work in school, when we work with children constantly, it's important to understand what our roles can be and how we as parents, as educators, we are there to support them and advocate for them and make sure that we are understanding of different things that we can do daily to protect our students. So one of the things that we want to have you think about today is, what are your hopes for your children? Our hopes is to have our children be healthy, happy, thriving kids, and it all starts with prevention. And that's why the main goal for our presentation today is to provide information so that we can take the necessary steps to prevent any harm done to our students, or our children. start off by sharing this little slide that has to do with some data that we've collected from the World Health Organization. It's an infographic kind of detailing the different types of abuse. We work with 4 different types of abuse. We consider that it's important to understand them. Sometimes they intermingle and they overlap, but today we'll just kind of get an understanding of their meanings, what to look out for. So we'll see here that we have physical abuse, any kind of maltreatment that might leave scarring, or hurt our children or our students. This is an infographic that refers to world numbers, international numbers, and we see that 23% of abuse is physical, 36% has been documented as emotional. There's another piece that's important, which is the neglect, which is also partly difficult to identify sometimes. Seeing what the resources are out there and what parents and teachers are able to document. 16% of physical neglect is observed internationally, and then sexual abuse, noticing that girls bear a percentage of 18%, much more than boys. And there's a very vulnerable gender difference there. But one of the most important things that we want to focus on is the fact that 1 in 4 adults report being physically abused sometime in their childhood. Physically or emotionally or sexually abused children tend to develop different symptoms of different illnesses, mental or physical illnesses, and we want to prevent that because it's been shown there's an adverse childhood experience shows that in the future, if these people do not tend to any kind of healing or attention, they will develop very big unease, physical and emotionally. So we want to make sure our children are healthy and happy individuals. My friend Chloe.
So what is physical abuse? Just as you saw in the previous slide, there's different kinds of abuse or types of abuse, and one of them is physical abuse. And probably this is the one that's a little bit more noticeable, but can also be, we can miss it as well. But the definition that we have here for physical abuse is any physically aggressive behavior, withholding of physical needs, indirect physically harmful behavior, or a threat of physical abuse. And so it's important to look at, this is something that is towards the body and can be noticeable, but there's different levels of it. And so if we can pass on to the next slide to see that there's a spectrum of physical abuse. And so there's the indirect physical abuse, which is physical negligence. This is the thing that's probably least noticeable, but could be just as harmful. Negligence meaning that we're not meeting the physical needs. So it could be lack of touch, it could be a lack of presence, those things that really, where we don't meet the needs of the physical needs of the person. And so that is something that is also physical abuse. And it's probably not as noticeable, or people don't think that they should report that, but it can be just emotionally as harmful. And then we move to threats of physical abuse. You know, someone actively saying they're gonna do something to the person if they don't do this. Or it could be forced physical restriction. So locking someone in a room against their will is a form of physical abuse as well, even though there's not physical contact, okay? Then in the next level of the spectrum, we see physical abuse towards something else or someone or a pet that is just as harmful. Even though it's not directly to the person, to the victim, it's very damaging emotionally when harm is being done physically to someone else or something that they value. So it could be damage to property as well. And then the more obvious one is the direct physical abuse, where there's physical aggression, when there's finally the harming of the body. And so it's important to look at all these levels in the spectrum of physical abuse and to notice that they all can be just as harmful. So when some indicators of physical abuse, what are some alarms or I guess red flags is the word, Maybe it's improbable excuses given to explain injuries. When we start noticing some injuries, people will start making excuses that probably don't make sense over a period of time. Injuries that occur to the body in places that are normally exposed to falls, rough games. So when they start saying like, oh, it's because I fell down, but if you fall down, it shouldn't be in that place where the bruise is there. Urinary infections or unexplained stomach pains. All of these are some red flags in physical abuse. Also, if there's a withdrawal of contact, that's something that can be a red flag. If someone doesn't want to, or they flinch when they get close to someone, that could be some red flags.
Thank you, Raul. And I'm going to talk about emotional abuse. And as Raul mentioned, it's actually more prevalent than the physical abuse and often underreported. It's very important to understand what exactly emotional abuse is. And, really, it's just, it starts off with some name calling, it's insulting, threatening violence or harm, even without carrying out the threats. That's very important. The child does not need to be direct victim of the abuse. This is very important. Simply allowing a child to witness the physical abuse or the emotional abuse is the same as abuse. It is considered abuse. And, what ends up happening is after this happens, sometimes the parents are, embarrassed about what just happened. And so they downplay the incident and never really discuss it openly, which kind of further fuels that abusive cycle. And essentially, the abusive cycle is the abuse occurs. And we see this more, in counseling as a high school counselor, where there's adolescents who are kind of questioning what's happening and more rebellious and maybe more vocal. And so they start to call out, the abuse. And so when they do this, the parents sometimes say, okay, they want to apologize, they're apologetic, and they try to win over their child by, buying them material things or taking them on trips. And then you see that cycle continue. There's the abuse, they get called out, and then there's that apologetic parent, and then it keeps going. Okay, that's the abusive cycle. And one commonality is really, it has to do with control. It's an attempt to control without using physical violence. Okay, so that's essentially emotional abuse. Some of the indicators that we see, and usually this is in early childhood development, is delayed development. So we'll see this more in elementary and maybe middle school. You see highly anxious students across the spectrum, fear of new situations, and this is by working with students, it becomes their disposition, and almost like they're constantly scared. It's their posture. And so students who are just fearful and scared and suffer with low self-esteem and low confidence, a chronic running away from situations. Okay, we see that often in the elementary years. Persistent tiredness, we see that across the spectrum, just exhausting, right? That abuse it drains your energy, and it's an exhausting process. So we see kids that are extremely tired. Attention-seeking behavior, we see this again across the K-12 spectrum. Obsessions or phobias, okay? Just exploring more of those obsessions and phobias sometimes let us know that there's a lot of emotional abuse happening in the household. And, again, extreme passivity or aggression. And again, the passivity is really mirroring the victim. If they're seeing their mom being abused and seeing that passive, they mirror that passive state, and they maybe because they're fearful as well, right? They've taken on that really fearful disposition. But also, we also see the other end of the spectrum where it's aggressive behavior, and here they're mirroring the abuser. Okay, so that's something just to also look out. That's what we look out as counselors for in terms of emotional abuse. I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Restrepo, who's going to talk a little bit about neglect.
So neglect is another form of abuse that we can see in children. And it has to do with not complying with giving children the emotional support they need and the physical care. So it's emotional and physical neglect. We can see when when neglect happens that medical needs are not met, deprivation of food or lack of nutritional food for children, exposure to alcohol, drugs, not only like providing the alcohol or drugs, but being part of an environment that is alcohol and full of alcohol and drugs. Abandonment, and this abandonment could be emotional as well as physical. A child can be with the parents at home, but wouldn't be taking care when their emotional needs are not taken care. They feel abandoned, even if you're present. A child can be abandoned. Lack of supervision, and we can see this from K to 12 with the little ones as well as the adolescents. Right now, when we're online, we can see lack of supervision. We can notice many kids spending the whole night playing video games or being online. Lack of supervision, it's a big one. Lack of hygiene. So when parents are not supervising that the kids take care of themselves until a certain age, it's super important that parents are aware that kids need to wash their teeth, they need to shower, the clothes need to be clean. So when there's neglect, we notice at school that children, their appearance looks deteriorated. Being deprived of an education is another way of neglect, and also not being aware of or not paying attention to their work at school and to support them when needed. That's also neglect. When there's neglect, we can notice that kids are they feel lonely, and they show this loneliness. They have difficulties relating to their peers. As I said before, they lack hygiene, and we can notice when we are at school, we can notice those. They have low self-esteem because their caretakers are not taking care of them. So their self-image is poor. Social relationships are a problem because if they have a low self-esteem, that this affects the social relationships. And if a child looks neglected, and if a child doesn't look clean, that doesn't help with the peers either. So this is also something that we see at school. We can notice with children that are neglected that they could have compulsive stealing, they could be self-destructive and tired, fatigue. And this is, again, physical and emotional fatigue. Okay.
So I'm going to go into a little bit of what is it that we define as child sexual abuse. And it's any sexual act between an adult and a minor, between two minors that exerts more power over the other. So those are pretty much the definitions that we use from World Health Organization. Forcing, coercing, persuading a child to engage in any kind of sexual act. And it doesn't have to be just simply a physical act. It also can be just conversations, exposure. It could create a lot of traumatic experience for the individual, especially when it's coming from a trusted adult or someone that they believe is there to protect them. So it is a crime punishable by law. Here in Panama, we have laws that we abide by, and in order to protect our students and our children. And it's important for us to keep in mind that, like we said before, girls are really exposed, boys as well. And as you see down here, 1 in 5 girls and 13 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18, which is alarming. And sometimes when we think about that, like we said, and we're going to touch upon it later on, it's not necessarily those physical acts, it's the voyeurism, the pornography, the communication that might be taking place online and internet, by phones, the sexting. All of those are components that fall into this, what we call sexual abuse. So it's really difficult to identify when a person has been sexually abused. And you might think it's very simple, but it really isn't. And when we talk about abuse, like I said earlier, abuse is a very complex factor that occurs in an individual. It has many components to it, and you might find that there's emotional abuse when there is sexual abuse. There could be also neglect and sexual abuse. There could be physical abuse and sexual abuse, and there could be several, maybe even all of them. So it really carries a lot of weight of understanding what each of these components mean and what we're going to be looking out for. some indicators, and this does not mean with any of the ones that we've seen before, that if you see that, then that means that person is being abused. That's why there is an investigation that takes place. A lot of social workers, psychologists have to play a large role in identifying these before we call them out. But these are just red flags for us to look out for. So we will see aggressive behavior, bedwetting, or a lot of anxiety towards strangers, and sometimes anxiety towards specific adults that we might need to keep an eye out for when they're fearful or distrust someone that supposedly is someone they can trust. Mentioning that they have a secret friendship or an adult that really, gives them gifts or treats them special. That's something that might lead into that. And we'll talk a little bit further about the grooming process, where this tends to be the initial piece before going into an act of sexual abuse. And when we notice a student or a child just not wanting to go to school or avoiding specific activities, let's say this child is not feeling comfortable with his coach and he really doesn't want to go to practice, and he keeps mentioning it, it's very strange. So it's important to listen to our kids and to understand when the normal routines are broken and their normal behaviors are completely different or really showing us some signs. When there's excessive masturbation or self-manipulation in the child with maybe inappropriate language or sexualized behavior, it comes to our knowledge, and we want to understand where that's coming from. Where's that information coming from? Where are they observing this? What are they being exposed to? Children explore, and sexuality is normal. What we really want is to have conversations with them. Open lines of communication will lead us into understanding their life and knowing who they're around, what they're exposed to, what they're doing. Okay? And another one is children might become depressed, or they might withdraw. They might not feel they can trust anyone. They feel ashamed at times as well, because many circumstances are that the abuser might make them feel like it was their fault and no one's going to believe them. And they put themselves in that situation. So that's basically some of the reasons why they don't disclose. So some of the warning signs of potential offenders, like we were mentioning before, that have to do with the grooming process or getting child ready to receive some kind of action that is not appropriate, is you want to make sure that you watch out for those students who are being seen by adults or others as a favorite student, a favorite child. Hey, I'll take your child out for ice cream, and I'll have special time with them so that you can work and things like that. It's important to keep that in mind. Person might not be using appropriate jokes or language, or attempts as many times as possible to be alone with that child. Like I said before, doing favors. In the grooming process, that person becomes a very trusted person for the parents, the adult, and it's more like that uncle or aunt, that is not really a family member, but that person who really goes out of their way to provide special time with your child or make them feel special. Sexualized talk is also important, like we said, the gifts, private chats, keeping secrets, and threatening language might also be another factor that we'll observe in the potential adult offender. So those are definitely things. Whenever you notice that a relationship is a little bit behind or above the border of respect that you typically see in a relationship between an adult or a child, or an older person and a child, it's important to start monitoring and having those conversations to see how your child feels, what kind of things are going on, what kind of conversations are they having, so that it's not like we're going to be paranoid, but it's important to be informed and to check and monitor. So we're going to play a little video today that we'd like for you to listen to.
We're going to focus more on the online behaviors of our teens, and just going into the focus of how predators can also be online.
Exactly. Since we are all at home and our children are more exposed to technology right now, we'd just like to use this as a reflection piece. I'm going to go ahead and present the video. Sorry, what happened? Sorry, let me go back. See if I can play it.
I never thought I would be chasing child predators. It was 2 years ago when our team intercepted conversations between a 12-year-old girl and a 40-year-old pedophile. He wasn't just talking to her, he was abusing her, coercing her, collecting images and videos, and no one in her life, her parents, sixth grade teacher, or friends, knew what was happening. I have a sixth grader of my own. I have 3 kids, actually, but you don't have to be a parent to be devastated by this. I work for a tech company that uses artificial intelligence to detect issues like grooming and sexual predation, and this is something we see constantly. These abuses are occurring quietly and mostly go unreported, and we want parents to know exactly what we know about what happens online. So we made a plan.
A man has been arrested for allegedly raping a 15-year-old that he met over Snapchat.
Instagram has become the #1 social
TikTok
media
is
site.
at the top of the free download
We've also seen firsthand the predatory symbiotic relationship that exists between Instagram and Snapchat.
We would create a fictitious 15-year-old girl, complete with a believable social media identity, put her online, and document how long it would take for a predator to approach her. But creating a person out of thin air is complicated. We needed photos, but we knew we couldn't use an actual teenager. It would have to be someone on our team. I'm 37, but our graphic designers assured me that with the wonders of photo manipulation, they could magically make me look over 2 decades younger. We bought clothes and accessories, studied body language and facial expressions. We methodically covered and edited signs of aging, wrinkles, weight shifts, and stretch marks. Meanwhile, we coordinated with federal, state, and local law enforcement. Then we built a story around her, a history, a family, a social circle. Livy was born in 2004 and is a sophomore who recently moved to Indiana. We created multiple online accounts for Libby, prominently displayed her age, and posted typical teen content. We even created virtual friends for Libby who would comment on her posts. With everything in place, we would launch the project, give it a few months, and see if anyone would buy it. So we hit the button, and Libby went live. Within the first hour of posting on Libby's accounts, 7 adult men contacted her. By the end of 9 days, that number was 92. The conversations ranged in severity from making sexual comments to sharing and requesting explicit photos and videos to manipulation and threats. The onslaught was so massive, it took 5 of us playing Libby full-time to keep up. We decided to move off-site where we could scale up the operation and gather as much information and evidence as possible. Since Libby is 15, men might try to falsely justify their actions towards her because of her proximity to adulthood. Would parents question, where's the bar? Would a 13-year-old face the same barrage of predators? A 12-year-old? How young could it possibly go? The graphics team transformed me into 11-year-old Bailey. Bailey is afraid of the dark. She hasn't had her first crush yet. She's still prepubescent. A parent might assume Bailey would be insulated from any sort of predatory attack. We launched our 11-year-old persona online.
444 and go. One like from a guy whose profile photo is a penis.
So let's say 1 minute and 7 seconds. We have a message request.
Although this, sorry, 2 more requests just came in. How much time? A minute and 40 seconds?
Yeah.
How
old are you? You go to the profile, you know that that is a child. It also says in the profile that the child is in 6th grade.
Another one.
It's just lighting up, like the inbox is just boom, 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 boom.
An incoming video call in less than 5 minutes.
don't be shy.
Few parents know just how dangerous these platforms are for so many kids, so we brought some on site so they could see for themselves. 11-year-old Bailey's persona was approached with an even more disturbing level of manipulation and requests. While the majority of the abuse happened from a distance, our child profiles also received requests to meet up in person, especially our 15-year-old persona. 28-year-old Keith was relentless. Like the others, he took no issue with Libby's age. He shared explicit videos of himself. He treated the virginity of an underage girl as a prize to be stolen. It was a tough decision, but if Keith wanted to meet Libby in person, we would let him. We synced up with our law enforcement contacts, and within 24 hours, we were on the ground and ready to meet. We already had evidence of what he had done online, but was he willing to carry things out in real life? We knew 37-year-old me attempting to pass for 15-year-old Libby would be a challenge. But I would wear a hat, a lot of makeup, and a big sweatshirt, and see if he showed up.
For a walk first?
What's wrong? Why are you not trying to rush upstairs?
What was that?
Why are you not trying to rush upstairs?
I don't know, I'm a little nervous.
Let's go upstairs then, don't be nervous.
I've never done anything like this before, so I'm a little nervous.
It's the first for everything.
Yeah.
Don't be. I'm not gonna rush you. We just go upstairs and talk.
Okay. Have you ever...
Be shy.
Are you okay with me being 15?
I've never done it. But it's okay. I like to gently make you comfortable. I don't want to just stay out with feelings. You know what I'm saying?
Are you hungry?
Stop trying to dodge it. Let's go upstairs.
Cyber tips coming in from the National Center for Missing and Exploited.
BARC turns over these potential child predators to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Using the app has led to arrests like this one in Florida last year.
The brutal reality is that a predator doesn't have to be in the same room, building, or even country to abuse a child. Libby and Bailey may not be real, but they represent countless children who are being sexually and psychologically abused, both online and in real life. I think about how I would have felt as a young, impressionable child. I would have kept the abuses to myself for fear of being shamed and blamed. I would have suffered with it, secretly and quietly.
Hi, did you have a good day?
Yeah. Do you want to ask my phone?
Yeah.
I was wondering, so in 2 more days you're going to come back?
That's right.
Okay. I love you.
I love you too.
Our work has led to numerous arrests, but it's a drop in the bucket. Our work, nor the work of law enforcement or legislation, will ever be able to protect children as well as engaged parents and guardians can. When asked, my advice for parents is to talk to your kids early and often, know what apps they're using and with whom they're communicating. When facing crisis, kids need a soft place to land. Make sure they know they can come to you for help.
I know that was a strong video to watch. We as counselors had many discussions around it, and we think it's important to share some of the actual experiences that we've been exposed to in terms of understanding that no one is safe or, let's say, you can't really avoid it, it's around us. Kids are on phones all the time, but we need to start creating those conversations and taking action. So I think Jennifer wanted to share a case that she recently talked about to us that I thought was really important.
Yes, so I'm also going to be talking about online grooming, but before I wanted to share an experience. So I was doing some research on TikTok, which is an app that is very popular among our kids, not only middle school, but also elementary and high school. So I was looking for resources for parents. And when I Googled it, I found the daughter of a very close friend, a teenager. She wasn't doing anything inappropriate. She was dancing. But of course, I saw the risk on this, the exposure that she has to the world and how predators are outside. And I know this because I'm a counselor, but most people don't know this. That's why we're doing these workshops. So I called my friend and I said, look, this is what I found. I saw this, I just Googled and I just saw your daughter here. This is very dangerous. And to my surprise, or maybe I'm not so surprised, my friend, who is a very educated person, she's a health professional, she told me that, yes, she knows, and her daughter and her are so happy that she has so many followers. And this is very, very scary. And I'm sure my friend doesn't have a bad intention with this, but definitely I told her this was very, very, very dangerous. So she took action about it. Thank goodness she listened to me. But most people don't consider this exposure that the kids have to be dangerous. Many kids have the TikToks open to people because that's what's cool, to have likes, to have followers. Same as Instagram. They open their accounts to anyone. So this is an important conversation that you need to have with your children on if their accounts are open. They might also have different accounts and you might not know how many accounts they have because it's hard to know. So communication is key to this. Catherine, you can. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to close up with this one. And one of the things why we thought it was so pertinent to bring this up and change our child protection presentation to more online is because we're all living this pandemic, and due to this, most of our children and most of us have an obligation to be more online. And what's going on right now is the Internet Watch Foundation has actually decreased the capacity of their workers. So there is less supervision online of those people who do the best to protect our kids. There's many, many, many more cases being posted around the world. And it really is sad because the predators, those who groomers, are out there right now taking opportunity to make sure to do what they please to do. And that's why just noting that the children have less supervised time, they're trying to make connections. And many of these countries that are going through this, it's just impossible to, if you report, for them to attend to those reports timely. So it's like cases of a parent just going in and trying to report to the authorities, this has happened to my daughter, something has been posted. For them to actually take down that post or do something, before it would take maybe a couple of hours or days. Right now, it's almost like there's nothing being done because the capacity of work is not there. So it makes us even more vigilant right now that we're in a very vulnerable position, and that's where we have to be more preventive. So I'm going to pass it over to.
So previously, Catherine referred to grooming, and the in-person grooming is. It could be someone close that you know and that might ask you to, might want to earn your trust and would offer to take your child here or there to take care. So that's in person, but there's online grooming, and it's very, very scary because these are adults that are on the internet and they're trying to get sexual content from children. It could be they would try to meet with them or just to share pictures or videos with kids online. So the scary thing about this is that they can have contact with our children 24/7, like any time of the day, any day of the week. As you saw in the video, which is very disturbing, but it's a reality. the kids are in the rooms and we don't know what's happening. Okay, so they have the ability to, because of technology, to be there and to access our children. They can groom the kids online by apps, social media, gaming sites, photo sharing like Instagram, and dating apps. There was an app that the kids were using recent before the school closed, and it's supposed to be for children, but of course there are adults that might get into those apps and get information from the kids. And even if they tell them, some kids would say, no, but I'm not giving all my information, it's still very dangerous for kids to be talking to strangers that might be adults. So what they do when they try to, when they're grooming the kids, is that they look for their profiles and they look at their interests. And that's how they connect with the kids. We know our children like to connect through internet, and more, as Catherine said, now we're at home and they have more access and they're more lonely in terms of socializing. So they would, of course, they would look for internet. So they use all these platforms to find out about our kids and to become friends with them and to groom them online. So once the relationship is established, they can ask for sexual content or have sexual activities, even if it's online, using the webcam that they have at home in their computers or their phones. They can be accessed by phone, by their computer. You know, it's really easy, and it's very, very, this is not to scare you, but it's a reality. And as Catherine said, we thought it was very important to share this. Yeah, so because children are more online now than ever, it's becoming so important for parents to be aware and to have conversations.
Like Jennifer just said, it's not that we want to scare you, we want to empower you, because knowledge is power. Understanding where we are right now in terms of technology, the time that we're spending at home. But we also want to offer you some tips and some strategies or some ideas of how you can also take action and protect your child and make some rules and have some conversations at home. So this is some information that we gathered from that website, from NCMEC, and it says that it's really important for us to, first of all, if your child's going to have access with internet or phones, have those conversations. What are the ground rules? What is safety? What does safety look like? What does it mean? Okay, check games, talk to them about the apps, go to Common Sense Media, see if they're safe. What are the privacy settings that they're using? Make sure it's the strictest one possible. The child needs to understand why we're making these choices. We don't just impose it. We sit down, we have a conversation about it, and we have them understand that it's only because of safety. We want to help them understand how to also empower them to take care of themselves. We don't want it just coming from us. We want them to be able to use their electronic devices openly at home in their open areas. Check their profiles. Some parents might say, well, it's their privacy. Yes, child needs privacy, but you're the parent as well. And it's also important to have the opportunity to let them know, I might need to check. I also want to know what's going on, or I might need to follow some of your posts. Can you share them with me? It's just being able to have that trust and understanding so that they know, even though you're not supervising constantly, there's someone there watching out for them. Explain that whatever is online is going to stay there. And that's one of the biggest psychological problems that occur when a child sends a picture and it's never, you know, in I don't know how many seconds, it's already all over the world. And that shame and that guilt and that really weighs in on the child, and for them to make those choices consciously. And also being able to understand that it's wrong when someone asks you to do something that goes against your values, something against your own well-being. And those people need to be under the law. They need to be called out, and they have the right to say that, and that you will always have an open communication with them so that they can trust you and take care of anything that might happen. So I'm going to pass this over to my friend Raul to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, as you're hearing all of this and what we need to be doing, there's one thing that does make international families more vulnerable. There's some elements that it would be important to highlight. And as we're an international school, and so There's a lot of international families. And what are some of those factors that can create some blinders for us not to be able to notice when abuse is happening online or presence? So one thing is the power differential in marriage. So for example, if someone is working, usually it's one parent that's working and the other parent has to stay at home. The one who has the work permit then has more power. That can create a vulnerability, especially if it's happening within the home, and then, you know, the other spouse can, or the partner can be threatening, saying, hey, you know, you're not going to be able to do anything because he has more financial power or she has more financial power. Also, the fact that parents are not there all the time, maybe they're working because of just like they moved to a different country because they're working. Maybe the nanny or someone else is taking care of the kids. And so parents are not present as much. And so maybe the one who's taking care of the kids, the nanny or someone else, they're not as aware of what are the vulnerabilities. So that's something that can be a factor as well. Also, just the relationship you have with the host country. If you're frustrated with where your post is or where you're working, you're gonna be less prone to take action to be well connected with what are the resources there are. Also, because maybe a company is deciding where and when what you do, how the family moves, that can, that you have a loss of control over the decisions that you can make. And you also think about the impact that will make on the company, and so that those fears can also create some blinders. Just this whole situation of moving around creates a lack of stability. That's something that it's great that a family stays. It's so important for there to be stability within the family. But just moving around is going to create some kind of uncertainty. And so that creates some vulnerability. And also, once you're moving to a country you're not very familiar with, it can create like a superficial relationship or a tourist relationship. And so you're not well connected with all the resources. And so it's important, that's a recommendation, that when you go to a country to know, whenever I have to report something, who do I go to? Or counselor resources, or psychiatrists or therapists, or the police, or those entities that help with abuse, to be well known about those. And we're gonna be mentioning some of those the end of our presentation. And so it's important to notice those things. And the fact that you don't have other family members around you, the extended family is an important part of when you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't know what to do. Having extended family is helpful, but the fact that you're in a different country, many families don't have that access. And so those are some things just to be mindful of. And that's what to do, what you can, what is it that you can control to be connected with the resources you have where you're at. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, that's Jennifer.
Okay, so in ISP, we started working on child protection a couple years ago, and we established a task force. And this task force is responsible on making sure that we're following the standards, the international standards for child protection. This task force is composed by human resource, security, after school, communications, counselors, and other teachers. And we're all passionate about protecting our children. Within this task force, we have the child protection officers, and the three of us are here. Samir for high school, I am the one for middle school, and Catherine for elementary. And our task, we have a responsibility to make sure that this information is offered to parents and staff and all the community. So when the school year begins, we have a presentation for staff every year, and then we have another one mid-year. And for parents, this is the second one we're doing. There's also training for the teacher assistants in elementary, cafeteria. We train the whole staff to make sure that we're all on the same page regarding the safety of our children. This is something that is work in progress. We think that we've gone a long way. Of course, there's always room for improvement. We are in charge of receiving reports, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. But so ISP, as I said, we've been working on this. This group of the task force has also been working on a child safety policy. We have one. It's being revised. There's a board member that is part of it's like the board member responsible of child protection, and we've met with, at some point we've met with this person, and it rotates depending on the board that is at the moment, but this is at the board level as well. We have a staff code of conduct, and this was also being revised, and it talks about what are the behaviors that are expected from staff to protect our children, but also to protect themselves in terms of abuse reports. So just not to create any type of confusion, when someone reports, how they have to behave in order to keep themselves safe and our children. So for example, when you go to school, you notice that the doors, the windows, we don't have, we have spaces where you can look inside. I'm in the middle school, if you know my office, and all the counselors, we used to have the windows closed. Now we always have a window open, and that's the case for everywhere. So we've been working on this and talking about this with the teachers regarding how it's the best way to be with students. And then we have reporting guidelines, which I'm gonna go, go back, Catherine, I wanna show something. Can you go back to the one, please? Sorry. Okay, so then also in our website, you go into our website, you're gonna see the policy. And what this does is that it keeps predators away. So when we have someone from outside trying to apply to work at ISP, and this person, if this person is a predator, and they notice that we have a child protection policy and we're strong in this, that keeps them away, because predators look for places where it's easy to access children. So if we are strict with this, or strong with this, this helps us keep predators away. Also, we have the HR also takes a lot of this very seriously when they're hiring, and there's a lot of background checks for teachers coming to ISP. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Next. Okay, so there's we've created a flow chart for reporting. So I'm not gonna go in depth, but what happens is that when there's a case reported, the CPOs are informed. It could be either of the three of us, and then we follow an investigation, and it's documented. And depending on if it's the case is a real case, or if it really has ground for suspicion, we are mandated to report within 24 hours. And every member of the community is responsible for reporting, even parents. Okay, because as Catherine said at the beginning, we're all responsible for the well-being of our children. If someone from the community suspects of a parent, hears something, or a teacher notices something in a child, it's most likely, almost like 100%, that the parent is gonna be called in to ask. If that's, parents should not get mad at this. We're doing what's the best for the kids. It's part of our child protection policy. Okay.
It's also important to note that if someone comes in to report, they will be filling out a form, but however, there is a possibility in most cases that it's an anonymous report, okay? Sometimes people are fearful of reporting because they don't want other people to know or think that they were tattletelling, they were doing something behind somebody's back. In no case, you go straight to the child protection officer, either Sunny, Jennifer, or I, and that is completely confidential. We just, we understand how difficult those reporting processes are, but we want that to be known. And we've told that as well to staff and to the community members. Okay.
All right, take it from there. Thank you, guys. So what do we do now? I mean, the first thing that's really important is just, you're here now joining this conversation, this presentation, is learning the facts and understanding the risks. And again, we're not here to scare you, we're here to inform you. You understand the facts and the risks. And so if you want to share this presentation after to somebody in the community, I highly recommend it because it's really important to be informed, okay? And so that when we're informed, we can minimize the opportunity and the risk. We want to create a household environment where we are constantly talking about this and addressing this. And I know, again, this can be scary and difficult to discuss, but it has to be done. We have to create a safe space in our household to have these conversations, okay? And so when we say talk about it, you know, a lot of students sometimes feel fearful to address this with their parents because based on how they're going to respond and react, and you know, and so again, you want to make sure yourself as a parent be very approachable. You want to kind of maintain a sense of calm and be really aware of your nonverbals when your child is explaining something or sharing something, because they're very aware of that too. And then anytime they feel that, you know, you're getting afraid or scared, they're also going to be scared and they're not going to share as much as they'd like. So, and just be aware that they sometimes reach out and share a little bit of information, and if they see if you're listening and how you're responding, if you're responding coming from a place that's calm and just general concern, they're more likely to share more, okay? And so it's really important to have these conversations and open conversations in your home. Again, recognizing the signs which we've shared. One of the biggest signs is any kind of change in behavior, okay? And I know our kids are constantly changing and growing. It's part of the developmental process. But you know, if you see a change in disposition for a longer period of time, that is definitely a warning sign, okay? So just being aware and mindful of that. And then, you know, reacting responsibly. I like the word respond, okay? And again, sometimes you don't know where to go, right? So the first place might be someone you trust, right? It could be a really close friend, just kind of, because you're going through all these different emotions and you don't know how to you're processing this and it's scary. And so it's important to go to somebody you trust first, right? And again, if you don't know where to go in the country you're living in, right? Because we're moving around a lot. We don't know the laws, we don't know who to call. A lot of our families come straight to ISP and contact the counselors. And again, as Mr. Strepa pointed out, we have child protection officers in each division who will take on these cases, who will investigate these cases, all right? And again, if you suspect abuse in another household, you can be completely anonymous. You can, you know, create an anonymous email, and we've had that before. Just share the information with us, okay? It's really, really important that you contact the school and so we can further investigate if you don't know where to go. So just quickly just talking about the facts, and again, this is not to really scare you, this is to inform you. You know, 1 in 5 children are sexually solicited while on the internet. And you can see that through that video, how easily that can happen. And the access a lot of our children give these predators, just by, again, keeping an online profile that's public. So that's, I would say, after this presentation, if you have children, you know, in middle, high school, even younger, the first conversation you might want to have is just check in to see if their Instagram, their Snapchat, all those things are private. They really need to be set at private. Okay, you might want to follow your own child to know when they've switched on to public. And so that's really, really important that the information is completely private. And your children will not like that, because when it's public, there's more people, and that means more likes, and that adds to their social currency. And so it's really, really important to have that conversation about keeping, you know, those pictures and information private, because you know the video showed those risks and how easy and how accessible people are. And so that's the first thing. You know, 30 to 40% of children are abused by family members, and this can be a trigger for a lot of people, right? Sometimes we have this perception that it's going to be a stranger. And there were these campaigns, I believe, in the 90s, you know, like the whole idea of stranger danger. And, you know, like, I know when I was growing up in my generation, it was like just, you know, being really careful around strangers. It was the focus of strangers, when the reality is, you know, 30 to 40%, it's happening with trusted members of the community and the family, and by family members, really. And, you know, fewer than 10% are actually abused by strangers. That's the fact. And these are universal, you know. And so a lot of it happens within family members. Again, a lot of it happens within trusted members in the community. We talked about grooming, right? Now, these guys, these families, these predators, sorry, are not grooming only the child. They're also grooming the families. They're building trust with the families so they can access the child. And they're very intelligent. So you have to be very aware of that. And I know in Latin America, I'm integrated into a Latin American family. I know it's a very open door. People are coming in and out. And, you know, in the United States, you have Thanksgiving where all the families get together and it's the one time everyone's together. I feel like that happens every week in Latin America. You know, it's people are always getting together. And so just being aware of that based on these facts. Let's see, any other interesting facts here? If you go back to that slide. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. 60% of child sexual abuse victims never tell anyone. Again, why don't they tell anyone? Because they're scared, right? So if this is a conversation you're having, I know after this presentation, to start talking about it openly, there's a greater likelihood that they might, your child might approach you, share something they've learned or something they've experienced. Here, of children who are sexually abused, 20% are abused before the age of 8. Okay, 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before the age of 18. Okay, so again, just to inform you, and again, these are pretty much universal across cultures. So what we want to do is really minimize the opportunity, right? So we really want to reduce or monitor any kind of one-on-one adult-child situation, right? And what I want you to think about right now is, what are those one-on-one interactions that are happening? Is it the music teacher? Is it the tutor? Is it the art teacher? Is it the coach? Think about who has access to your child, right? And again, these predators are very intelligent. They're finding ways to access children. They're selecting jobs. They're getting trained in different career pathways because they have access to these children. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And so think about that, right? So how do you minimize that? Again, we talked about they're trying to gain trust of the family first, and then working the way and gaining trust with the child. So if the family trusts the person to the child, they're saying, my family trusts this person, it's my dad's good friend. He's trusted in the community, he's a well-known coach or well-known tutor. And so, you know, again, it creates the child is more comfortable around this person. And again, is less likely to, if they do something, is less likely to have like any kind of, the intentions are still positive and the child is kind of naive to what's really happening. Because why would somebody want to hurt me if they're a friend of the family, right? And, you know, again, activity should be visible and or able to be interrupted. So there's never a time where your child should be with another adult alone, even if it's a family member. I know, like uncle, aunt, cousin, like there really needs to be some monitoring happening. And we always want to assume positive intention, but we really have to be vigilant and just be really aware, hyper aware. There's a story, I'm not sure if you're aware of it. He's an acclaimed U.S. gymnastics national team doctor, an osteopathic physician, and you know, he would build relationships with families, really well known, and he would actually abuse the children while they're in front of their parents. So the child is seeking treatment, the parent is in the room, and the child is being abused in front of the parent. And even the parent, again, because we have this default to assume positive intention, doesn't think anything's happening. And because it's happening and the child sees their parent in the room, they feel like this can't be, this is probably part of the procedure, okay? They don't start to question, they don't question it. And so again, just if you want to learn more about that, there's a podcast called Believed that's very powerful if you're interested in learning more about the grooming behaviors of predators. And there's also a book called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell that highlights this particular case. Okay, it really goes into the grooming, which I think is really important to learn more about. We talked about minimizing the risk, right? Does the organization you trust your child in have policies? And we do. We're very lucky and blessed that ISP does have a policy in place. We have procedures. And as Jennifer showed you the protocol and the flow chart, we have child protection officers that are trained to handle these types of cases, okay? just thinking carefully about the safety situations. Again, older students, so we talked about, a lot of parents have talked about the busing issue at ISP, right? So just the idea of like, it's very important to be aware of like older students when they're mingling with younger students, if they're being supervised, again, to minimize those risks. And again, it's just really setting an example to avoid these isolating one-on-one situations with your children. You don't want to encourage them. You want to just make it really well. Okay, so somebody's coming over, making sure it's in a very open space. It's not happening in the bedroom. It's happening in a common area. You're constantly there to interrupt if you need to. Just modeling that, making that really a part of the agreement and making that the norm. And then, again, this is something that parents really struggle with, is just monitoring the child's internet and mobile phone use, right? So chances are you've purchased that phone for your child, and so it's really your phone, okay? And you should really know what's going on that phone. You should have access to that phone at all times. That phone should not be in the child's room, okay? As Mr. Restrepo pointed out, with the internet, the predator has access to your child in their room, okay? So if the phone's in the room, the predator is virtually there in the room with them. I think that's fairly important. And again, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to just keep it really real and honest. And so we really want to monitor that usage. And so it's not inappropriate to check your child's phone, check out the apps they're using. And I know it's going to, in the starting, children are going to be defensive over this because chances are they might be looking at inappropriate things online. They don't want you to see the things they're texting one another. But as a parent, you have that right, okay? And you should have access to that. And it might create a little bit of a conflict. It's going to be a hard conversation, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be well worth it, okay? And you just have to establish the new norms if you want to protect your child and have those hard conversations. And if you want to reach out to one of the counseling staff, we're more than happy to help you with those conversations. Next slide.
Yeah, so I think Samir did a good job of going deep into what can we do to minimize the risk. And so part of this is also the kinds of things that you say and the kinds of questions whenever you notice that there's something that's vulnerable. Whenever you notice a vulnerable situation, our first reaction is to avoid the situation, and we assume best intent. I was like, oh, okay, they're just trying to do something, but we need to be proactive and be courageous. It actually takes a lot of courage to be able to say, okay, hey, it's the policy that the door should be open during lessons, for example. I know that in this moment, we're not in that situation, but you need to be popping in to when your kids are online, we're at random times, spontaneously. And if you notice there anything, you need to be able to say something, right? Or if you notice any kind of suspicious behavior to say, hey, the policy is this way, or I recommend you to be working in this space instead of locked up in your room. So what we say and those courageous conversations are so important and can reduce the risk so much. And the thing is, offenders, they're rarely caught in the act, but they're sometimes caught in breaking those, I guess we'll say, smaller rules that will lead to something larger or something worse. And so many times we avoid when we see like a boundary is slightly crossed and we just like, oh, it's nothing, but then something worse happens. So we need to act on when we see those rules broken, to say something about it and always go back to, you can use the policy that we have at ISP, and it's important to talk about what are those things that we have in place. So also it's important to know how our kids communicate. When they report things or say things, they may leave stuff out, or they'll try to protect the adult. They might want to say that it's someone else, and they pay very attention to your reaction. And they might even shut down if you respond emotionally or negatively. So it's so important to pay attention to your tone of voice, to your nonverbals, and just not to react negatively, but to be listening and caring and understanding in that moment. So it's very important that even if it comes to nothing. Whatever you think is, it's important to believe the child. We always want to believe the child in that moment. And we want to praise them for saying something. If the child says, hey, I feel uncomfortable about this, say, hey, you were very brave in that. You said something, and you stood up and you said something about that. That's a courageous step to reinforce that behavior. And to ask an open-ended questions instead of closed. You know, the closed type of questions where it's yes and no, but more open-ended questions where they can feel safe to share what is it that happened. Okay, so it's so important that we protect our children. We need to believe them in that moment. And if we're wrong in the end, we hope that we're wrong, but we first need to believe them, and then that way we can have a chance of stopping any abusive behavior in the future. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where Samir also mentioned about, I like the word responsibly, to react responsibly. The root word of that is to be response-able. We need to be able to respond, and that takes courage. Many times because of fear, we cowered out, or we just avoid the situation thinking that it's nothing. But we need to report if we discover something immediately, because we are here to protect our children. And this is why we're doing all of this. And if we truly love our children, we want to protect them with all our heart. And that means that takes courageous adults to do that. So I would like to show some more things, like resources that we have. Make sure to protect our kids. That's one of our roles. That's okay. We want to be able to protect our kids. Your role really matters. It's not just us as counselors or just the teachers or just admin. It's you as parents that have an important role to be able to protect your children, to report, to say something. And so we've had all these different elements that I think have been helpful for us, and I'm really sure that it will be helpful for you in protecting our kids. And so some of the resources that I think will be open as we're finishing up this presentation. One of the things that I've really liked is if you're not sure about reporting an abuse, one thing that Samir had mentioned is that you can contact us, and there's 3 child protection officers, Catherine, Samir, and Jennifer. And you can just mention that to us and we can help investigate that. But there's also a group called Fundación Unidos por la Niñez, that they're experts in sexual abuse or any kind of abuse. And there they have therapists, they have counselors, they have lawyers, they have specialists that can help guide you on what to do and to evaluate if this is something that's reportable. So if they haven't moved, they're in Kurundu, Llanos de Kurundu, not Kurundu, but Llanos de Kurundu, where there's some tennis courts there. In that area, it's close to the Albrook terminal. And so there, I would recommend visiting this website, unidosporniñez.org, that they have some good resources. A lot of the resources that we're using now is Darkness to Light, d2l.org. You can see there, d2l.org. It has tons of information that is so helpful, and they actually have free training there. So if you want to really delve into more about how to be more prepared for sexual abuse, they have 20 years of experience. And this organization is the one that really opened my eyes to the importance of doing this more. I remember when I first came to ISP and I got their training, it was so impactful. So I recommend for you to visit that website. I also wanted to show a YouTube video. It's called Fight Child Abuse. It's a YouTube channel. And they have some great videos for children to watch. Steps, very practical steps, different scenarios of what do they do whenever there's either experience abuse or there's potential for abuse. And now I've noticed that now we've recently put in new videos for older kids, for middle school and high school. And so there's some videos there that they can watch as well of how to act in these cases. So I recommend that YouTube channel. If for example, you don't have access to us or you're not able to go to that organization, Fundación Unidos por la Niñez, if you have any question, there's 311. It's not the direct place to report an abuse, but they're like a hub and they can connect you with anything that you have to report. And this is something that I had personally had to do when I noticed that there was some physical abuse happening in a family. And I had to call that, and they referred me immediately to the person I needed to talk to. I spoke to them, I told them what was happening, and it was like half an hour or less, I would say, that there was already police at the door finding out what was happening with the family. And so it was very effective in my experience. I don't know, maybe different but if you don't know where to call, because there's different numbers you can call for suspicion of abuse, but I would try that one. There's also other numbers that maybe my colleagues would know as well. And here we have some other resources. I think we can provide these links afterwards since you don't have access to this presentation, but we'll copy these links. There's the World Health Organization resources is great. They have some international statistics that are great, and they have suggestions of how to treat it, suggestions of what to do when you have suspicion of abuse. There's a good parent handbook there. NSPCC underwear rule, it's a great book to read for your younger kids of how to teach your kids what to do in case of abuse. And it's a really nice, kind of like a storybook that is I recommend that one if you have younger kids. And for any kind of parental controls, if you're thinking about, okay, is this app safe for my child? Is this device or this game or application or whatever it is, you can go to Common Sense Media, and that's a good website. I'm sure that you've probably heard this in other presentations, but there's also a blog there that's Parents' Ultimate Guide to Parental Controls that is helpful there. So
and this has come from our tech team at ISP. They recommended parents check out that link to see if you're just concerned about filters and how to keep your children safe online and limit the access to inappropriate websites. Just check out that blog. There's lots of suggestions there.
Yeah, and we'll be sending this to you. And so thank you so much for being patient with us. And this is something that is so important. We have to be talking about every semester. I think we need to talk about more frequently. And the whole purpose is to love our children and to protect them. And so I don't know if anybody else wants to say something, but we thank you so much for being here. Questions, any questions?
Yeah, we're gonna get into the questions. There are a few questions in Pigeonhole. So I'm just gonna read the first question out that has, it's based on voting. And so, is there anything children can say or do to make the abuser uncomfortable or feel threatened? So I'll repeat that again for our counselors. Is there anything children can say or do to make the abuser uncomfortable or feel threatened?
Well, I think one thing that
Go ahead, Paul.
I think I remember seeing in the presentation as well, and I think that when a potential abuser or an abuser knows that an institution or a family, like they have very clear boundaries, that also helps them to hey, I'm not going to be able to do this in this area. And so I think when they know that there's a policy in place, that there's a child protection officer in the school, and when they know that we have a clear plan, and we're not creating any blind spots. So for example, in our school, we try to have clear windows where people can see what's happening in the offices. And online, as we're doing this, we're recording the videos when we're doing class with students. And also I let parents know when I'm going to meet with a student so they can know at what time exactly. Like when we have stuff in place, then there's going to be less potential for that. I don't know if someone else has something.
I want to say that. Sorry. I want to say that having conversations with your children about this, open conversations, would empower them to tell an abuser, I'm going to tell my parents. The abusers would manipulate children, saying like, if you say this, you're going to be in trouble. I'm going to hurt your parents, your brother, your sister. So that's why it's so important to have open conversations and tell your children, it's not true that they're going to hurt your family if something happens. Yeah. So I think that's key to have conversations before these things happen so they can know how to react.
So
it's also important. I've noticed that sometimes parents are also very scared to say something to somebody else. They might feel embarrassed. Let's say you have a friend who's touching your child in a way that you don't feel comfortable. We as parents are also going to be role models to say, you know what, I don't think this is the proper way to touch my child, or I don't feel comfortable the way you're touching my child. Or also, it's important to also give them guidelines. Like in our house, we talk about child protection. If you're bringing someone to your they can't be alone. So you let them know that you are aware, that you have a specific expectation in terms of what behaviors, just like a code of conduct that we tell our teachers, and that's going to deter a possible abuser as well, because they know that you're on the lookout. When people know that you're aware and you're on the lookout, then they probably are going to look for somebody who's just not paying attention situation.
Yeah, and I think one strategy, one technique that some of the predators use is they use the secret, right? So they say, this is a secret between you and I, and don't tell your parents. And so we don't want to ever really use that word in our household, the idea of secrets and sharing secrets. It's really, we shouldn't really be sharing secrets. So, you should, like, as a father to my child, I don't want to be saying, oh, this is just our secret. And so the whole idea of secrets, we really need to have open conversations about them. There's no secrets between our family, and be really firm about that. And have a conversation about that with your child. And I think even also, like, when you're with your child, I'm just thinking about myself training my child, to use the bathroom and helping him stand up and go pee. And I say, like, listen, the only people who are allowed to do this is, and I'm very clear about who those people are, and no one else is allowed to touch your private part. And so have those conversations regularly. Every time he goes pee, I'm like, and can anybody else touch your part? No, only mommy, daddy. And so it's very clear to him. So if anybody asks or tries, it's going to be something that he knows is not right. And he'll know how to respond. And hey, this is, so again, having those conversations, as Jennifer Restrepo pointed out, with your child regularly is extremely important, and practicing that. So practicing those responses in advance. So when that time, if it does, unfortunately, if it does happen, we hope it won't, they know how to respond. They know that it's something wrong. Okay, and they know if someone says this is a secret, hey, there's no such thing as there's no secrets. There shouldn't be any secrets, and they know that's a trigger for something that could potentially be something wrong, or they're involved in or getting involved in something that's wrong.
You can substitute secrets for surprises. Like, we're going to have a surprise birthday party, but it's going to be known. It's going to be talked about afterwards. It's not something that's going to be kept forever away from the person. So there's a difference between secrets and surprises. And that's a conversation that you can actually have with your child about that.
And, even just like think about, as a child, like the horsey ride, when, like you put your child on your knee and you're like kind of like a horse, and you're being physical and touchy with your own child. Again, while you're doing that, it's again important to say, like, hey, this is something that you do with that. Like, this is something we do together. No one else, you shouldn't be sitting on anybody else's lap. I don't feel comfortable with you sitting on anybody else's lap, except my lap or mommy's lap or Abu's lap. And so just be very clear about that, and having those conversations, constantly having those conversations. So your child knows that, if they're on somebody else, they're going to feel uncomfortable, and that's going to be something they're not going to want to do. And they're going to feel like something's wrong, and which is important.
Especially for the little ones, I'm going to say one last tip. It's really important to call the genital parts names by their names. Because there have been situations where a child might go up to an adult and say, my daddy or my grandma just touched my cookie, and you have no idea if they're talking about the cookie that you eat or if it's a genital part of their body. So that has been something that has been brought up several times. If that's why we teach in school with our curriculum of safety, please use the proper labels for the parts of the body, because we want to empower our children to be able, if they need to disclose or communicate, that they're going to be able to rely that information accurately and stay safe. So that's another important piece.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's great. Yeah. We have 2 more questions there in Spanish. ¿Qué recomendaciones les puedo dar a mi hijo cuando vaya a una pijamada?
Okay, so PMAs are tricky ones. I'm also a parent, and I know kids want to do PMAs. I think also ask first, if you decide to do that, ask the parents who's going to be at home, how are they sleeping, what are the protocols in your house openly, and then try to be the pijamada with not like more than 2 kids. Like the more the merrier, and advice to be with not to be alone in the pijamada. Like we want to trust, but we need to be careful. We never know. So just try to not to be alone in the house. Just if you're with your friend, be with your friend, follow your friend around, or if it's more than one friend, it's better. And also, again, open communication. If something happens, let me know. If you need to call me, if you feel uncomfortable, call me at any time. I'm going to be home. If I need to pick you up, I will pick you up. You don't have to stay in a place where if you want to go, it's okay. I will pick you up. Those are the conversations that I would recommend you have with your child before and with the host of the pijamada. They're tricky, but I understand as a parent where you wouldn't say you want, I know, there are parents that would say no, that's a policy, and there's parents that are going to let the kids, with some being a bit afraid, but taking some measures.
And we have a slide about minimizing risk. So just be aware of the risk, like when you're not there and your child is at a pajama party. I'm assuming pijamada is pajama party?
Yeah.
Okay. If your child is at a pajama party, like you have very little control there, right? And you don't have any control of who else is at that pajama party. There might be another relative, an uncle, an aunt that's there who might have access to your child. So again, the risk has increased now, right? And just being aware of that and how comfortable you are with that risk and with the family that's hosting. And another thing to know is that, like, thinking about school trips, it's remember, the predators are people who are trying to be around children. So if there's somebody in the community is constantly having pajama parties, that's something to think about. That could be a flag. So just being aware of that. Again, we're in default to have positive intentions, but I think you really have to be aware and hyper aware of these things.
I agree. You know what, when Jennifer just mentioned the fact that when you go up to that parent, you let them know that you're going to be aware, that you're going to be calling, that you would like to know all the details, because that gives the parent or whoever is there an idea. This parent is really wary. This parent is really on top of their child. It's going to be harder for me to do anything because they are really cognizant of. So that is exactly what we want to do. We want to show others. We're not afraid to ask. We're not afraid to say what our expectations are, because we're taking care of our kids. And that's exactly what we need to portray to everyone, because that's going to deter an abuser.
Yeah, and it goes back to the first slide of just, you want your child to be safe, and over being labeled as that parent, like there's a label of that parent who's overly concerned, who's calling, and that could be annoying to some people, but you'd rather be that parent and have your child and make sure your child is safe. Like, if safety is first and foremost, then it's okay being that parent. And there's another question: ¿Cuáles podrían ser algunos protocolos de seguridad con mi hijo de 8 años?
Yeah, to translate that, it's what are some security measures that can be taken with my 8-year-old daughter?
Well, the first one we mentioned today was make sure if they have any, I know they shouldn't have any accounts because they're underage, but sometimes we've heard of children having Instagram accounts even when they're 8, or Facebook accounts. That's something that we need to consider. We need to remember, whatever is going to be used technologically, there has to be parental supervision. There have to be strict settings, privacy. So those are important. The content of the things that they're having access to on the internet, you should be able to know what they're watching. Look at it before they look at it. See if it's appropriate or not.
Yeah, I know that now with the new kind of routers and Wi-Fi systems, you have more power over what you have access, and also how long they can use. Like, you can shut off the Wi-Fi of one device and still have Wi-Fi for yourself. And so you have a little bit more control, and I'm not as technological to be able to tell you some of those names now, but to investigate like what are those things where you can change those privacy settings on the Wi-Fi system and also on your firewall, but also, yeah, how can you have control? And there's apps that also help you do that, and you don't even have to buy an expensive system. So,
and we know that like YouTube has really replaced television, and so a lot of students spend a lot of time on YouTube, and YouTube is recommending things they need to see, your children are pretty savvy. Even by 8 years, they know how to like just reset their history, and they're aware of that. And so maybe it's an agreement in the house, like your history stays there. If history is resetted, could be an alarm for you to kind of say, why is the history reset? What were you watching? So just an agreement is we don't reset the history when you're watching YouTube. And I just want to be really careful with YouTube. I think that's, I know they're trying to monitor what people are watching, but it goes from video to video and it can get really dark very quickly. And so you have to be very vigilant because that is now just the new TV. So be aware of that. So again, just looking at what they previously watched is very important and making that the norm. Okay, like that history is available to everybody.
Yeah, I just sent a link to a website that I think is really good for families. It's called, we should have put this in the resource page, but it's FOSI.org. That just gives resources for parents, like how do you create family agreements, for how to be a good digital parent, and how to, yeah, it's really good. I would just go in there, FOSI.org, and it has a lot of good resources.
Okay, I think we've reached the end of our time today. We could go on forever and we would love to, but I know everybody has amazing things to continue doing. I think it was very valuable. Thank you for all the panelists today that shared their experience and the information with parents. If you have more questions, like we said before, do not hesitate to reach out to any of us at any time. We're more than happy to support you or guide you in the direction of any other information if it's something we don't handle. But we appreciate you taking the time to share this information with others. We hope it was valuable to you today. And we're happy to have had you here in our child protection presentation. We hope to see you soon.
And this is recorded, so Daymar, if you understand, our marketing team is going to send this out to parents. Correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Great weekend. Take care.
Okay. And Daymar, I don't know. I think I closed the share settings. I don't know what else I need to do.
Because there's 7 participants.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm still here.
Hey, Daymar, do we have any parents still on, or are we good?
2 more.
Okay. Bye, parents.
They both say your name.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Let me turn off, yeah. Well, one is my wife.
Okay, I see it now.
Give me a second.
It's intense, this team is.
Everybody's going now.
It's a very intense.
I'm actually surprised we didn't get as many parents.
Yeah, me too. And I talked to the PTA. There was no any report from somebody trying to log in and were not available. I was checking also the ISP communication email and nothing there. Today in the morning, there were only 2 people registered.
Wow.
So, and I was talking to Jill from the PTA. For next week, we should really advertise and not only on the calendar. So if you can write something really quickly today, and we will make like a news and alert on the Dolphin Dispatch today saying, would you like to know about the main concerns or the main recommendations for transitions, or would you like to learn something about this? those 3 call to action questions and a little bit of the content that you will share, that always makes people like to be more aware of what will the conversation will be about.
Okay. Can we?
And actually, I talked to Jill this morning, and I asked her to send a reminder on the chat for the room moms. I'm not sure. I'm not in the chat of the rooms, but we usually do that. We ask her to, on the same day, send a reminder. So I will upload this today. So actually, it will be on the Dolphin Dispatch today, because it's really, really valuable information. And think about something for next week, and we will upload that on the Dolphin Dispatch for today.
Thank you so much, Daimar.
Can you advertise this recording into the Instagram?
It's not the right channel to do that. I mean, this type of content is, Instagram is not the best platform, and so Instagram, and this is one of the things that sometimes we have some questions. Instagram really is to promote the joy of the school, and it's not really only for ISP parents. This kind of content, really, I know it's for everybody, but our concern right now is for our community. So advertising this properly on the Dolphin Dispatch, it will be, we will target the people that we're trying to reach. From the numbers that we have, 80% of the people are reading right now the Dolphin Dispatch.
Okay.
Good. Great.
So they are engaged with the content there. So we will do that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Very welcome. And it will be unlisted on YouTube. And it will be kind of embedded on our website, so people can go there and watch it again.
You know, I was looking into the website, and it's hard to find the resources for COVID.
It is. That's something that hopefully it will not be necessary anymore, you know. Thinking that this will end soon. But yes, we need to make this more handy to people.
I don't think it's gonna end soon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Friday. I'm trying to be positive.
I know. Okay. Thank you, Daimar.
You've been of great help. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daimar.
My pleasure. So work on that for to promote and advertise. And next week, I promise it's gonna be.
When do you want that by?
If you can have something for today.
Okay. Too.
Let's do that right now before we go then.
That will be good.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.